Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. I thought we had agendas printed out, but we don't. So I'm going to just give you a rundown right now of what we're going to do. And we're starting pretty much on time, which is great. It's 6 o'clock. And our first presenters will be from Santa Fe County. You may have heard about the grant, the HREE Home Rehabilitation Energy Efficiency Grant that is available, and it includes money for testing of water in the well and also filtration.
Not well testing, just for filtration. As far as that is.
Well, they're here, so you'll find out the real deal. They're here to speak. They will first give you some updates of what's going on for issues, and some of you were here for the last PFAS meeting. We'll have some updates on the city and the county working together and things like that. Then the HREE people are going to speak about the grant funds that are available for filtration systems for your home and other remodel renovations. And then New Mexico Environment Department is going to speak about all sorts of things that are PFAS related, including the EPA grant that they received and how it might apply to us and other sources of funding for private well owners.
Okay, so the other thing I just wanted to let you know is kind of who's hosting the meeting. So I think it's really good for you to know that. So first of all, my name is Andrea Lickers Crawford. I'm the president of the La Cienega Valley Association, which is a community-based organization. We're all volunteers. And these meetings actually started because we started working with Santa Fe County to try to get some sort of resolution to well contamination that was found by the county in certain wells in the right now in La Cienega area. And so what we've and it's in the water table. We know that we need to figure out the nature of it and where it's going and so forth. Okay, and so Shelley will talk more about all those things, but we started working with the county to try to get some resolution for residents and to try to move things forward and see what we could do. And so they hired Shelley on, which was wonderful, and she has been the public liaison for PFAS for the county. There's a link on the county site to information about PFAS. We've already had several meetings about PFAS, so this is not the first meeting. We have, I can always email you a link to the prior meeting, which is up on YouTube. And we have been working with the county, who is co-sponsoring these meetings and co-hosting with us. So basically it's a collaboration between the county and the community group to try to figure out how to resolve it. So that's who we are, and this is Kathleen McLeod, who was very recently appointed to be our co-chair of the PFAS task force for the Valley Association. So she is in charge of keeping things running in terms of all this PFAS stuff. She has brought me great relief because I was really stressed out trying to do all of this along with my other stuff, and she's doing a wonderful job. So I just wanted to say thank you for being here, and if we could just give a round of applause for Kathleen. With that, I'll hand it over to Shelley Muller from the county, who will provide an update.
Hi. I just want to let people know there's like 7, 8, 9 seats up here in front. So there should be, at least at this point, enough seating for everyone.
And we'll call on you.
Yeah, okay. I hate to start before people are settled. We can also have sign-in when the meeting's over. If you want to just have a seat, that's really only about sign-in. Right. Right. I also just want to say on the table in the back there are printouts of information about the HREE grant program for the county, which we're going to hear more about. And there's other just kinds of flyers about PFAS and impacts on your health from PFAS contamination and information about testing at your well and filtration. So when the meeting's over, if you want to go back there and grab some handouts, they're there for the taking, and we have English and Spanish, I think, in most everything. So I'm Shelley Muller. I'm actually a contractor. My background is public health, and I'm under contract with Santa Fe County to really be a liaison between all of the efforts to characterize and do remediation of the PFAS contamination that's been found, and you all as the community, and really to keep bringing information to you, and then bringing your concerns back to entities who are trying to address the issue. So that's my role. And what I'm going to start out with tonight is just giving you some updates. So for those of you, I just wonder if I could, just so I have a little bit of context, did any of you or all of you happen to go to that very initial meeting that we had at the community college in March?
Yeah, I was online.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So basically, I guess everybody knows that there's been some contamination that has been found in some wells around Cienega and Cienega, and that the source that we know of right now is from the Army National Guard. Basically, what they believe has been stemmed from the firefighting foam from the trucks. At least that's what they're thinking now. But they are doing a more thorough investigation of the actual contamination. So they are in a process. This is an update to the Army National Guard. And we have 2 individuals from the Environment Department, so when they're out here, they may be able to give you more information. But at this point, what's happening is they're going to be doing a remediation investigation, and they are in the process right now of just formalizing all the plans to get that project going. So it actually has not started yet. It's a really long-term process, but we will have representatives here in Santa Fe County in September, and it is our plan to invite representatives to come to this meeting. We have PFAS community meetings every month, and I have already extended an invitation for them to come to one of these community meetings so they can directly explain to you what they're doing in their remediation investigation and answer your questions. And part of that investigation is getting community input, so they are also interested in coming here and seeing how they can build that into the work they're doing. So that's that update. As far as from the Santa Fe County, yeah.
Does that include right of recovery, since they're the ones that may have been at fault? And if there are your wells that are contaminated and you need to do something or get an infiltration system, the right of recovery from the source is actually something that can be made a claim against?
It's complicated. Their process is like 3 years or something. So really, that is the idea. They are responsible. That is the idea. We're talking the Department of Defense. Yeah. So, but yes, in theory, yes. And I think, we have some Environment Department people here, and maybe they can speak to that better than I can when they're here tonight. So for Santa Fe County, some of the work that they're doing to address the issue, they have a grant from the New Mexico Environment Department to investigate the contamination so they can characterize if there is a plume and what that looks like. And their process, it's like a $460,000 grant from NMED, the Environment Department, to Santa Fe County. And they are going to be contracting with a company to do that work. And they have already put out a solicitation. They've received applications to do the work. They're in the process of reviewing those applications and doing some interviews with the people who applied to do the work. And they're hoping to actually get a contract in place and start the work late summer, early fall. And they anticipate that work to characterize the plume will take approximately a year, maybe less. So that's that update on that work. And then along those same lines, they also have signed a memorandum of agreement with the city of Santa Fe. So the city of Santa Fe has agreed to partner with the county on that work and allow them to do monitoring wells or any kind of thing they need to do that's on city property, for example, the Santa Fe Airport, or if they want to be testing water that's released from the wastewater treatment plant, or whatever's needed to do that investigation, modeling, and characterization of the contamination. The city of Santa Fe has signed an agreement to partner with the county and really collaborate on that work. And as a matter of fact, they even had a city employee sit on the grant review process and Yeah, so they're partnering in that process, not only in the investigation, but also in solutions. And do you have a question?
I just wanted to have a comment and just say that getting the city of Santa Fe to cooperate with the efforts of the county is a monumental task that has been accomplished because of the PFAS contamination and because of the hard work that everybody has done. The city and the county don't generally like to work together on these sorts of things, and I think that we're hoping that that will change in the future, and that this is a good, really good first step in getting the city of Santa Fe, who has the wastewater treatment plant, which we know has lots of issues, to start addressing those issues with the plant as well.
I have a quick question
Yeah.
too. So is this joint venture between the city and the county, is that specific totally to everything related to PFAS?
Yes, it's about PFAS contamination.
It's only for PFAS, not E. coli, which is a totally separate issue, which we'll be addressing separately.
I was in the meeting that we had downtown, and I recognize what you said, and somebody employed right there, that the mayor does not recognize the Cienega or Cienega, but he does recognize our taxes.
For some of you who are standing in the back, we have some chairs here. I'm happy to like move them to the side if you feel more comfortable, but if you'd like to sit, there's chairs. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So is the plume contained or can it be contained or controlled?
Well, they haven't even, like characterized,
They don't know.
they don't even know if there is
They don't know the
a
extent of
They
it.
don't
Well,
even
you
know,
referred to one,
I
so
can characterize a
So I'm
plume.
inquiring
Yeah.
of one,
Yeah.
you know, and is there any controller of contamination, or is it one will be controlled, or?
It's totally out of control, but we're trying to figure out where it is so that we can start trying to control it.
It's not.
How did it migrate so quickly into areas like here?
I don't think people know that yet. Yeah.
But it is airborne.
But it's been there.
So
It's airborne?
it can be airborne, yeah.
I don't know, John, do you want to say anything
I read
about all
something in
this?
this document.
I mean, we've got you here, if you have any comments, or Andy, I welcome you guys to come up and address some of these answers.
Sure, happy to do that.
Yeah.
I'm John Roderick, I'm the director of the Water Protection Division at the Mexico Environment Department. So a little about the division, when I talk about that division, it's groundwater, surface water, drinking water, and we have construction programs which funds infrastructure. The problem that we have with PFAS statewide, but we'll speak specifically about here in La Cienega and La Cienega, is that we know that it's there in some wells, but we don't know yet where it came from. The source hadn't been identified. We don't know what the extent of it is, whether it's a plume or whether it's individual pockets, and let me explain why that's potentially a possibility. First, let me ask a couple of questions. How many people here have upholstered furniture in your house? Couches, chairs? How many of you have washing machines and do laundry? Okay, I ask that because an unfortunate reality is that everything we use on a daily basis, furniture, clothing, a lot of times laundry detergents, all different kinds of chemicals, have these PFAS chemicals in them to some extent. And so what that means is, every time we do a load of laundry, we're adding PFAS, right? Small amounts, but we're adding. And so now we have the potential, right, for that water to be flowing into, if it's going into a city sewer system, then it goes to the wastewater treatment plant, right? But if you're on a septic, like a lot of the properties out here, it goes into your septic tank and can potentially move to groundwater. So as much as it would be nice to say we know what the source is and we can go control the source and deal with this problem, the answer is we don't know for a fact what the source is. We've got some ideas. Obviously, National Guard facility has identified some PFAS contamination, and they're moving forward to identify that. And the way their studies work is they begin with what we've already identified, and then they move out from there to figure out where the boundaries are at. And they've committed that if that investigation shows that that's moved all the way down to here, they're going to be responsible. But they don't know that yet. Neither do we, nobody knows for sure. So that's why it's so important that the sampling that the county is engaging in is valuable. That's gonna help us understand what we're dealing with, how big this issue is. And by big, I mean how widespread is it, okay? The fact that it's in any one well, to me is a big issue, all right? It's a problem, but we don't know how big it is. And I will tell you that the public water system wells in La Cienega, the mutual domestic wells, have not sampled, or they've been sampled, but not showed any PFAS contamination so far.
Can you repeat that last sentence, please, the last two sentences?
Well, I hope somebody's taking notes. I'm getting old. So, the fact that there's PFAS contamination in any individual well is a concern. It's a big concern.
But did you just say that it hasn't been identified?
It has
In
not
the
shown
mutual
up in the
domestic
mutual
water.
domestic
Yeah.
wells. So in the public water system, anybody that's on that public water system, they're not seeing PFAS in those.
Oh, it's in the private wells.
Right.
Uh-huh.
So part of the study is to determine how deep are those mutual domestic wells versus the private wells? Where are they pulling from in the aquifer, right? But it may also be, this may identify that we don't have a huge plume, we've got pockets that have to be dealt with. So as much as that's not the answer I want to give tonight, that we don't know, that's the only answer we've got. Now the next side of that is, National Guard is committed to doing their study and they're moving it forward as quickly as they can. It takes time. It's extreme. I mean, they're going to be drilling some wells. They're going to be doing soil sampling. And they don't know the scope yet, right? Because they move out so far and they sample. If they get hits, they move out further again, trying to find the edge of this thing. All right?
Yes.
Sure.
Do we know the health implications of this?
That'll be a separate meeting, just so you know, we can't talk about all these topics at one meeting, okay? That's why we have a monthly meeting. And so that health will be one of the topics that we're gonna have people from the Department of Health come to give presentations on health. And potentially, if we can find some medical personnel to actually provide those sorts of discussions. There are some handouts on the county website about health, PFAS in your health that you can get from just type in Google County, Santa Fe County PFAS, and there will be a link to all of the resources there. So if you want to look at it before our meeting, feel free to look there.
The water to sewer plant keeps on going to the outfall committee. So has that been tested?
That's part of what the city is engaging in right now. So Santa Fe is an interesting situation, right? Because their actual discharge permit to the river is a federal US EPA discharge permit. We don't have control over that, all right? We do have control over the previous discharge permits, like where they did the solids disposal by the airport. And so we've asked the city, nicely, we asked the city to do some additional soil sampling and well monitoring and stuff like that to determine if there's PFAS contamination in those solids that potentially can leach on out of that with rainfall and stuff like that. So there's a lot of aspects to that. We're dealing with the city of Santa Fe on a different discharge issue right now. But EPA Region 6, who holds their discharge permit to the river, is aware, and they are talking with them about the PFAS. And I will tell you that
I do want to bring it back to Shelley to finish with the updates before we go into
I'm good with that.
because they're going to come right after Shelley. So we haven't talked about a very important county program enough yet that is out for residents that will benefit you. That's probably our biggest news. All of this is stuff that we already have up on the website. We already have the information there. The county, we decided not to put it on our LCVA website, but that should be a countywide thing. The county created a whole separate link on their website just for PFAS resources for the community. So it's all up there, it's open to the public. There's tons of information there. So I really advise that everybody go on there and take a look at that stuff and find the things that interest you.
And there are a lot of printouts in the very back table here.
And so you're right, let's shift back to what we're gonna be here at the end of this thing, happy to answer any questions you've got. So I promise we won't run out the door. All right?
Yeah, the only other update I had, John addressed, and that is that the city is planning on doing soil and water sampling around the wastewater treatment plant here. I think they have 7 monitoring wells, and the plan is to do testing once a quarter for 1 year of all the water, all the monitoring wells, and just for PFAS contamination. And they're using the EPA recommended guidelines to do that testing. And then they are also doing soil sampling, and that's starting very quickly, probably by July, they should start doing that.
So that's around the wastewater treatment plant
Yes.
as well as the airport, is that
No,
correct?
no, it's just
Not
the
around the
wastewater.
airport, because that's the potential source.
Right, it is. But hopefully the airport will be included in what the Army National Guard does.
Yeah, but that's gonna take 3 to 4 years for them to do the study.
Right. Okay, so
Okay,
now
well,
what I
we're
want to
going down to that
do,
study.
yeah.
What about the river? Is there any intention by anyone, city, county, the river runs
I
through it?
don't know. Is
The
that-
movie, the
Well,
river
the
runs through it.
So the river, the lower Santa Fe River, almost the entire flow of the lower Santa Fe River is actually water from the wastewater treatment plant. It's treated effluent. That's what is in our lower Santa Fe River below the Paseo Real wastewater treatment facility. So all of that water that's in the lower Santa Fe River, so there's a bunch of potential sources of contamination that everybody's got to look into, and hopefully the county will look into all of them, is my hope. But it's the septic systems, it's the wastewater treatment plant, which is the lower Santa Fe River, and the impacts of the lower Santa Fe River. There's also some separate work being done independently on the lower Santa Fe River, and I'll just mention that. And then there's the airport, the Army National Guard facility, and then there's also like private entities that could be contributing to that as well. So there's a lot to look into. So that's gotta be a big study, and it's gonna take some time. What we have recommended to residents, in case anybody's planning on leaving early, put a filtration system on your house or under your sink. There's some actually pretty affordable systems. And we will be, after their presentation, we'll be talking about that grant through the county that's up to $50,000. Okay, so we'll talk about that now.
So Paul, you come up and let's talk about this grant program through the county. Instead of me giving an update, we've got Paul Olson. He's the director of the community development department for the county. And that's where this grant program is housed. And he's here to tell you about the grant program and how it works. And with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. So hello, my name is Paul, and I'm with Santa Fe County. I know a lot of faces in this room. Been coming out here for 25 years almost. Since I think I'm driving out here. But I'm now with the county and the community development department. And on the back table, there's a couple flyers. I'll start with this one. This is talking about a new program the county has just initiated through our affordable housing program. And it's called the Home Rehabilitation and Energy Efficiency Program.
Can you speak up louder?
Just we want to yell.
But move in too, don't you?
Yeah. So I'm here to talk about the Home Rehabilitation and Energy Efficiency Program. There's flyers on the back table in English and in Spanish. This program is funded through the county, and it allows for people who have 100% or less of the area median income to qualify for a grant up to $50,000 to do home repairs, test water, and put on remediation systems if that is required for the testing. So the area median income depends on the household size. For example, a household of 4 in Santa Fe this year, it changes every year. This year, a household of 4, the area median income 100% is approximately $90,000, $91,000. So if you have a household of 2, or you have a household of 5, it just ratchets. And it's the household. It's not the individuals, it's the household. So if you have 2 or 3 people with jobs in the household and your income is over the median, you would not qualify. But it's all spelled out on this flyer in English and in Spanish. And on the back side of this flyer, there's contact information for the person who's helping run the program. And this is really important. And everything is being done online, but we recognize some people may not have access to online facilities. So you can use the telephone number here or the email, if you have email, and you can reach out to them and we will provide assistance to folks who are interested in the program and want to apply. So, yes, ma'am.
Police is very forward, because I feel, this program, because I started with the application. I'm not technology savvy,
Okay.
and I've been doing it since it started till today, and I haven't been able to complete it. Why? Because I don't know how to work a computer, the way the younger generation does. So, here, the elderly people, are probably a lot like I am. We are not technology savvy.
And that's exactly why you have a
They can. I
phone
called
number
Donna.
here. Yep.
Donna couldn't answer. They sent me to the sheriff department. Captain Pullman called me. He had no idea what was going on. I finally talked to the staff. She said, you can come into the office and we can help you. I have a 20-month-old great grandson. I'm battling cancer. I have to go to a bank and get the 3 statements of the last 3 months. So, how do they expect for me to do that when, I will not qualify? By the time that I'm going to qualify, the grant will be already taken care of by the younger generation or people that are technology savvy.
Well, we're doing our best to help you. And if you've spoken to Estrella, I can follow up with her. Does she have your phone number and your contact? I'll follow up with Estrella tomorrow. And, we also have, I can tell you the numbers, but let me finish the presentation and then we can have more of a discussion. We're doing our best to be as helpful and supportive of the entire community as we can. There's a whole range of things. We have one person running the program right now, so we're trying to expand that.
We can also help locally. The Valley Association can also help locally, so you don't have to go away into town. If you want to come over, one of us on the board or one of the PFAS subcommittee, I think that's one of the things we can do and we're trying to set up. So if we know there's a need for help, we can set up here at the community center and say, come on in, we'll have our computers and we can help, fill out the paperwork. Okay?
I like that, yes.
All right.
Question. Can you be reimbursed? I've already put in a new filtration system.
No, you cannot be reimbursed. But if you're eligible, there's other things you can do. So you can do the water or any contaminant that might be there. You can test for it. You can look at a new roof, new stucco, and new windows. And coming in the fall, we're going to expand to energy efficiency programming as well. We have another grant coming in. However, we cannot retroactively pay for things. That's just the rules. So the program is only for unincorporated areas of Santa Fe County. So if you live in the city, town of Edgewood, Espanola, you do not qualify. If you live on a tribal land, you do not qualify. You must be a homeowner and you must own the property. We can't fund renters, but we can work with the property owner to do this project on a rented property, but it has to come through the owner, not through the renter. And all this is covered in this flyer, and then next to this flyer, there's another one that has some frequently asked questions, and this will give you a little bit more background on the program. And we're happy to have you call. We can talk through it and give you guys ideas, thoughts, and the grants are up to $50,000 per household. That's one time only.
So you don't have to repay it. That's why it's a grant and
Yes.
not a loan. Okay, so that was one of the complaints we were hearing from residents. The county was trying to put together some programs to help support residents. And so one of the complaints we were hearing is, well, we don't want loans that we have to repay, So these are monies that you would not have to pay back if you were to qualify. So if you're kind of on the border, you might as well apply and see if you qualify,
Well, and the first thing is to talk to folks, because the sheer first cutoff is if you don't meet the income qualification. If you make too much money or you have too much revenues or funds, you just won't qualify it. So you don't have to spend your time and take the energy to try and go through it, because it requires quite a bit. I'll get to you in one moment.
Okay.
So here on this frequently asked questions, there's many others. So the main things are you must qualify as area median income, and you must own the property. Or you work with the property owner and have them apply on your spin. Okay, the grants are for up to $50,000, one time only, but you have 12 months to apply for the full 50,000. So if you wanted to test your well today, and it has contamination, you could apply for 50,000, but only take 5 right now to do remediation, or 3, and then if you wanted stucco or windows or something at a future date, within that 12 months, we could work with you on that. But after 12 months, unless you get an extension, which is possible, but it has to be a special reason, then you can maybe go up to 18 months. But because we only have one person right now working on it, and we have $1 million for the entire county, and up to 50,000 per. So that's a chunk. And if you have something that you want to do that's more than 50,000, you are responsible for the additional monies beyond 50. So your total project was 75,000, then we can only go up to 25, or 50, I'm sorry. The other 25 is then the responsibility of the homeowner. Yes, ma'am.
My neighbor, 4 of my neighbors and myself were Benton County testing. We all are contaminated. We all replaced our water systems, and you're saying we're out of luck.
I'm saying for this program, we cannot reimburse you. I'm sorry, but that's just the fact.
Is there another program?
Not that we've stood up yet. I can take your feedback with us, but it's a state law. We can't undo it.
And I want to also just mention that the county did not contribute in any way to the contamination that is in the wells. They are here helping because the residents need their help. So they're trying to put together programs as quickly as they can to respond. This is the first program they've put together. I'm sure they'll continue to put together programs, and we don't know what those will look like. But right now, we don't even know who's responsible. And until you know who's responsible, you can't ask them to pay for the things that you put in, or the money that you. But save your receipts, because there could be a chance of reimbursement in the future. So that's actually awesome. That could happen too. It's a major. There's a lot of things
I'm not having anything left.
I know all about that.
I have another question.
Yes, ma'am.
At $1 million and 50,000 conversion, that's about 20 households or 20 people who qualify. So I'm just for the public, probably thinking that probably it's not going to be 50,000 per qualified applicant, but maybe only be 20. That's really like people with 20-year households.
Oh, yeah.
But it could be in variables, and I just want to clarify.
Yeah, because someone might ask for the full 50, someone might ask for 5.
That would be me.
And some might ask for 12. So,
Yes, so I just want to make sure they know.
And we also are very cognizant of that. This is the first time we've ever done this, ever, and it's countywide. So we're kind of trying to measure input and their interest, and then also take input to see how we might adjust it. But it's really, we're inventing a wheel here. We've never done this, and we're not aware of anyone in the state doing this comprehensive of the program. And just one more thing, I'll get to your question. So, to your point, right now we have 214 applications in process already. And the majority are not from this area, which is interesting.
Yeah.
We have 36 under. So, and we have the ability to add more funding to this. So 214 applications are in the system, and they're either complete or just being added to and updated. We have 36 that are complete and under review, and we've approved the qualifying level of 9. And so then the next step, I want to read these next steps. So if you qualify and you go through the paperwork, which is a lot, if you qualify, you would we review your application to make sure the income qualification is met, and we will work with you if there's missing documentation or other things you need. We can help and work on that and support you. Once we get the person qualified or the homeowner qualified, then we will do a inspection with a contractor or the water tester or whoever it might be to help determine what is the need and level of the commitment. We've had people who said, I want to redo my driveway. You know, that doesn't, that's not, the focus of the program is not to redo your driveway. If you have problems with your house, if the roof is failing, if you have PFAS in your water, that's what we want to do, and we're trying to help the people who are probably least able to afford it by themselves. So after we do the scope and it's approved, the homeowner would be the one that selects the contractor to do the work. Then we would authorize the work would be completed, and then we would reimburse the contractor for that work. So the homeowner doesn't get a check for $50,000 or $10,000 or $2,000. It all goes through, and that's another state procurement rule that we have to follow all of our rules. But we will staff that. We will provide the support to make that happen, and we will work with the homeowners in the selecting what work they want to have done, who they want to have do it, and we also look at the time frame. It's really important too, because like the numbers I just read, the 214, that's in 2 weeks and 2 days. So this is it's a brand new wheel that we're inventing, and we're going to try and wrap it up as best we can, but we're going to learn as we move along too. So with that, I'll stop. Did you have a question?
It's more that I really appreciate, the grants that offered. It's a wonderful news for a lot of people. But our problem is more question to you, you are more than me. We all, the community has the problem, yeah? What the problem is completely, I think, different than this grant. So, what is our solution?
And I'll
That's
give you,
what we can do,
I'll
for
give you the
example.
long and I'll give the very short of it. The very short of it is that we recommend that everybody test their well, unless you have a neighbor right next to you that's already tested, and then you can probably guess that you have it in there. And the second step is to get a filtration system in place. There's some filtration systems, even if you don't qualify for this program, you can get, we had our last meeting, we had a presentation on filtration systems and the costs of installing the different types of filtration systems. And there's a YouTube link to that I can email to you if you give me your email. But basically, you can get a under the sink filtration system that's very cheap.
Very cheap and very easy, but we are talking about the little water we can drink. The water we have in the whole house, I think everybody.
There's a full house filtration system.
Yeah, and
as
it's
well.
costing like $8,000.
And then you said
It's around $1,200 to
Yeah,
$1,500 for a full house
that is the
filtration
thing,
system.
I put a little filter under the sink when later I start to figure out this is nothing, absolutely nothing. I am showering myself, my children are
You
showering.
can still shower with water that has PFAS. There's no evidence, as far as I've seen scientifically
You're
speaking,
not at all.
that it goes,
You're
as long as
breathing.
you're not consuming it. So that's where it's mostly coming, most people who have higher levels of contamination is coming from a drinking water supply. That's
That's your biggest point.
the biggest point of contamination. But there's all these other sources that I think were touched on by the
We should probably
environmental.
keep moving on.
Yeah,
We
we need
hear
to,
about all
there's
this.
But
definitely
yeah.
information, there's, some filters in the back and talk to someone after the meeting. I'm happy to share my experience.
But the bottom line is that we recommend you test, you get a filtration system, and then we figure out as we're figuring out the next steps, because as you can see, all this is going to take a long time.
Right.
So in the meantime, you should protect your health by getting a filtration system of some sort if you have PFAS in your well. That's the bottom line. Okay, moving on.
Okay, I'm done. There's these flyers, like English and in Spanish, if you want to take some and give them to neighbors or friends, whatever. This is the frequently asked questions. Also, there's some blue or green business cards on the back table with my name and number, and you're welcome to contact us. But specifically for this program, the contact information is on the back of the brown flyer. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if you need help, truly, like, with the technology part, reach out. I mean, everyone has the LCVA thing, but shuffle them over to me.
Yeah, La Cienega Valley Info at gmail.com. Okay, that's my Valley Association emails. And if you say, I need help filling out the forms, I can have people that let me know, and we'll try to find someone maybe to set an appointment, and then to come to you to try to help you.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that email address again?
Yeah, it's La Cienega Valley Info at gmail.com.
Okay, so now we have Andy Yocum from the Environment Department, and I don't know, Andy, if you want to just give a really quick self-introduction of like your role.
Sure.
He really is been such a great resource. Everything PFAS, he seems to be able to answer. If he can't, he finds out. So, yeah, great. I'll just turn it over to you.
Thanks, Shelley. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate the chance to be here and talk to you all tonight. My name is Andy Yocums. I am the Source Water Protection Team Lead. I work in the drinking water program that John mentioned is within our Water Protection Division, of which he is the director. And my job is primarily to work with public water systems like, for example, the local La Cienega Mutual Domestic, to come up with solutions to potential, or in some cases, actual contamination issues that are present in those communities. Up until very recently,
Could you please be quiet back there? It's hard to hear all these conversations.
Hey, guys.
Go outside if you're gonna talk to us.
thanks, sir. I apologize, and I'll try to speak up as
That's
well.
okay, you're doing fine.
And so up until basically about 2 months ago, there were no such thing as drinking water regulations anywhere in the U.S. for PFAS at the national level. Some states had them, New Mexico did not. That all changed in April. The Environmental Protection Agency now is regulating 6 different PFAS chemicals in public drinking water systems. And for better or worse, the key word there is public water system. So what you think of as your mutual domestics and your drinking water utilities. The city of Santa Fe, the county of Santa Fe has various drinking water utilities. Now, obviously, a lot of you folks in this room are not on those systems, and you have private wells that serve all your water needs, from drinking water to showering, to washing, to irrigating your garden, to washing your clothes, everything. And the unfortunate reality, not just in New Mexico, but basically almost the entire country, is that water quality in private wells is not regulated. Now, the water quantity, as you probably know, is you can only take so much out of your private well per year. But water quality, unfortunately, not. And so that really, at its simplest, is why issues like this that seem like they should be so easy to solve, to work with folks to get filters on their wells, to get that contamination cleaned up, that has a lot to do why that ends up being more complicated than it ought to seem. Now, what I want to do is I have a little presentation put together, and I'd like to just kind of walk us through some of the basic things that we know about PFAS, both in a very overall sense as well as specifically here in New Mexico. And that'll involve getting this thing on.
I keep threatening to bring a teenager when we do this kind of thing to deal with the text. I've got my grandkid on speed dial, but I don't have enough signal on my phone.
It's coming. Thanks, y'all, for bearing with us. Now, I know that there's going to be a lot of questions from this presentation. So what I'm hoping to do is kind of show a few slides at a time and then have a pause to take questions from you all. And with that, let's get it going here. And it might be a little tricky with me standing right in the middle here, so let me know if there's, I know some of you folks probably, especially on the west side here, might not be able to see me so well, or see the screen, but just let me know if I can step out of the way so y'all have a chance to see what I'm showing up here. So the first thing is just that, what are PFAS? And I know a lot of you were at the town hall back in March, so you probably got a lot of this information from that or from the various handouts that you've been receiving from us or the county. But there's just a few things I want to say about them. They're man-made chemicals. There are thousands of them. There are a lot of PFAS. And as I mentioned, there's only 6 that are just now being regulated in public drinking water utilities. There's a reason they're called forever chemicals, and as you all probably know at this point, it's because they just do not break down easily, either in the human body or in the environment. And I don't expect everyone to go back to their old chemistry class or chemistry textbook or anything, but there's a reason why that is, and it's because they consist of these long structures of carbon and fluorine bonds. That's one of the hardest ones to break down in nature. And so that ends up having a lot of importance for things like how we treat PFAS and what technologies we choose to use to treat PFAS in our drinking water. By the way, Teflon is probably one of the best known PFAS. Now, as I said, there are thousands of them, and within that big family, you could call it a PFAS, there's all sorts of different flavors of PFAS. Some actually do break down a little easier than others. The problem is when those ones do break down, they usually break down into the other PFAS that are hard to break down. So yeah, a lot of times it's kind of hard to come up with good solutions to get these things out of water or whatever, soil, whatever they may be in. John talked a little bit about a few of the instances that you might find PFAS in products around your home. There's at least 200 different documented uses of PFAS that range from things like, dryer sheets when you're doing your laundry, in all kinds of different chemicals, cleaning products and stuff around the home. And then they're also used often to manufacture different other things. So when you hear about non-stick pans, like this picture down here, in the Teflon on those pans, one of those PFAS that's being regulated now, PFOA, and don't worry too much about the acronyms, it's, as John said, it's an alphabet soup with these things. PFOA is used to make Teflon, but it's not typically usually in your non-stick cookware. In Teflon, at least based on the research we have so far, and I want to point this out and I'll say it again, that can change, but based on what we know so far, it doesn't appear to have the same kind of adverse health effects that things like PFOA do. And so that's often a very important distinction to draw when we're talking about all those many thousands of PFAS chemicals. Now, the other thing that we've already heard from that you all are very aware of is that there are other secondary sources of PFAS, and these can be things like landfills and wastewater treatment plants where all that runoff from a community or a set of communities is ending up. So we call these sometimes passive receivers. It's kind of more of a technical state regulatory type of term. But what we want to emphasize there is that, they aren't the ones that cause the PFAS to end up at their facility necessarily, or ever really. And the same could be true of a public water utility, a mutual domestic, and that kind of thing. By the way, these are all slides that we always show the public and in different types of meetings, so we can make those available to the Valley Association as well to distribute to those of you all that would like a digital copy. And then if needed, we can talk about maybe printing out copies for those folks that might prefer that. Andrea.
I just had a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I hear you correctly, you're saying that when wastewater comes into a wastewater treatment plant, it already contains PFAS that comes into it from all these other sources like our dryer sheets or our excrement or all these other things, and so it's already there, and if they're not filtering it out, it's likely that it could naturally occur at the wastewater treatment facilities. Is that correct?
Right, and naturally, I mean, they're all human-made chemicals, so there's no such thing as natural PFAS. But you just mean like
not naturally. I've
know
called out
exactly
using that
what you
word
mean.
before. I've already been.
It's all right. It's all right because some of the other things we talked about, like arsenic and nitrate and stuff, they do have also natural sources, but not PFAS. But I think what Andrea means is that they just kind of end up there to begin with. And, maybe think about it this way. The city of Santa Fe is sitting over there, and think of it like it was a big bowl or a big watershed that's feeding down into this one point, which is that wastewater treatment plant. You can imagine that it really could potentially add up at a place like that, because it's a whole city that is feeding all into this one spot, basically, where all the wastewater is going to this one spot. And this is a little bit cartoonish, I apologize, but that's just kind of represented here on this cartoon, which is kind of showing the different exposure pathways for PFAS in the environment, of which wastewater treatment plants are just one example. There are plenty of industries, as I mentioned, that use PFAS to manufacture their products. We don't have so much of that in New Mexico, fortunately. That's more of a kind of a Midwest and East Coast problem that we know about so far in the U.S. But unfortunately, what we do have are things like airports, Air Force bases, different types of aviation bases and facilities that have had something called AFFF on hand. In fact, some were required to have it on hand for a long time. And AFFF, again, don't worry about the alphabet soup, but just remember that it is a firefighting foam that was made using PFAS, because PFAS helped put out fires on anything that started from a petroleum-based fire. It could seal off that surface between the air and the fire. And if you can take away oxygen from a fire, then you're taking away one of the big things that keeps fires going. So that's why they were on hand at airports and Air Force bases in places like that. There also are potential contributions from places like landfills. Again, just thinking about all the waste from a city or a community ending up in one spot, and then maybe reaching into the groundwater, or surface water, as the case may be. We have a study with U.S. Geological Survey that they measured the Rio Grande at different points, all the way from Taos down to Las Cruces and El Paso. And sure enough, as you go downstream, and if we have time, I've got some slides that show this, you can see that concentration of PFAS tick up and up and up. And you can see the number of different types of PFAS in that water increase as it goes through urban areas and developed communities. Yeah, this is a perfect time for questions, so let's stop for a second.
Do private ownership of the people in their home? Do they have AFFF, or can you buy them that don't have it?
That's a great question. The question is, do fire extinguishers that we have in our homes have this type of PFAS-containing foam in them? It's a hard question to ask or to answer, and the reason is because some of those companies that make that AFFF foam that we know for sure has PFAS also make those fire extinguishers that we have in our homes. If you look, a lot of times they have these things called safety data sheets that explain what's in their product, anywhere from these big Air Force base foams to our little fire extinguishers. I've got one in my car out here. A lot of times it will say something like, no PFAS intentionally added, which is, I'm not an attorney. I'm guessing there's probably a legal issue, a legal reason for that language. I don't know how you accidentally add PFAS to something, but apparently it's possible. In general, the consensus seems to be that most of them probably don't, though. And the reason is, again, that the reason that it's so useful for places like Air Force bases and airports is because they were petroleum-based fires. So, maybe if you had a gasoline fire or something like that, it really worked really well to put that out. They don't necessarily work as well on other types of fires. And there's actually different classes of different firefighting materials. And I don't think that our home extinguishers fall under the same class as AFFF. That's a great question, but thank you for asking that.
I was just gonna ask, are those firefighting foams that contain PFAS, just using that as the whole chemical, all the chemicals, are those still being used to fight fires in New Mexico? I'll make it even more local.
The question is that AFFF PFAS firefighting foam still being used in New Mexico or anywhere? I'll say this, it probably is still on site in a lot of places. The Department of Defense, though, has been trying to be proactive about phasing it out and switching to other types of firefighting materials knowing what a big problem PFAS has been at many of their facilities and installations. So I think, my best guess, and I'll stress that it's a guess, but my best guess is that most of the time it's probably not being used, but it probably is still on site, and there may be a limited number of occasions when it is used. For instance, there was a fighter jet that went down in Albuquerque at Kirtland Air Force Base a few weeks ago, and you could see the media footage of them putting it out with that fire out with the foam. We don't know yet if it was in that, but it could have been used for that. I definitely would not want to totally rule it
And
out.
I just asked that because we also have the Santa Fe Airport, as you know, even as recently as last year, an airplane crashed into one of the residences in our community. And so, those airplane fires and crashes and treating those is an important question for our community as well.
Right, exactly. So in just my really quick research, I could find a handful of crashes on the Santa Fe Airport, grounds going back to 2017 or 2018. Again, certain entities like the Department of Defense are aware of the problem and they're trying to phase it out because it causes big problems for them, obviously. But I just can't help but imagine that it still is on site in a lot of places, just because a lot of it was produced for this exact purpose, and it's not so easy to necessarily get rid of all the amounts that have not been used. Yes, sir.
So if we all put filters in and they all become full, all these PFAS go where? And we're creating a bigger problem that nobody can deal with. I guess that's my question. What happens to all these?
That's a really good question. The comment / question is, if everyone's treating their water for PFAS with a carbon filter or maybe a reverse osmosis system, eventually, those don't last forever. Eventually, you got to switch out that material, and by that point, it's basically contaminated with PFAS. If you don't mind bearing with me, we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end here. Great question. So I know that Andrea and Shelley mentioned that you're going to have the Department of Health folks coming here, but I did want to give a really quick, just high-level overview of what we know about the health effects in PFAS. And the 6 PFAS chemicals that are over here on the left of this table are the 6 that EPA is now regulating in public utilities. Going across from left to right, these are different known health hazards that have been studied and confirmed for different types of PFAS. A big one sticks out on the left is cancer. There are several that are known as carcinogens. Now here's the thing. You can see on this list that we've only got check marks there for 2 of these. So basically the message I want to drive home from this table is that not every PFAS has the same set of health effects as others. Actually, one of the most common health effects, and it's not that surprising when you think about it, are how PFAS affect the liver and the kidney. Well, of course, these are our organs that are dealing with contamination in our bodies. So it's not that surprising that those are some of the more common health effects. Kidney cancer is one, different types of liver effects, unfortunately. But basically what I want to point out here is that not all PFAS, just check the entire list for all the different types of health effects that are out there. But there are enough that, it's something we're concerned about, and that's why the EPA took the step to regulate them in drinking water.
Question?
Yes.
The first one, the PFOA, is that a bad boy that is found in the fire retardant chemicals that they've been using at the National Guard?
It has been found. The question is if the first one listed up here, PFOA, is found in the firefighting materials. And yes, it has been found in firefighting materials. Out of the ones on this list that I can say for sure off the top of my head have been found in firefighting materials, PFOA, PFOS, PFBS, PFHXS, and GenX, so 5 of the 6. There's a complicated story there where certain PFAS were invented because the companies that made them started to realize that they had bad health effects, that they were toxic. And so they would invent new PFAS to replace those. And this was largely before they caught the attention of, the federal and state governments and health regulating agencies. So before they could kind of get, slapped on the wrist for that, they started switching out those for other ones. Now the problem is, for instance, a good example of that is Gen X here was invented to replace PFOA in things like firefighting foam. The problem is it turned out to have pretty much just as bad health effects when they studied it in more detail. If there's a bit of a silver lining with these 6 listed here, I can at least say that Gen X, to my knowledge, has never been found in New Mexico. It is probably at this point in time mainly limited to the East Coast where it was manufactured. But yeah, that just kind of goes back to the same thing, that these are harmful forever chemicals, and that because of their chemical structure, they tend to have at least some set of different types of health effects, at least the ones that have been studied in detail. And again, a lot of those thousands of PFAS we really don't know that much about yet, unfortunately.
So if it's on the East Coast, and it's been for a while, and that's where some of these things were generated, are they more advanced in the control of?
That's a good question. Are folks that have been dealing with this for a long time, like the East Coast and the Midwest, the manufacturing areas of the country, are they kind of further along in dealing with PFAS? I would say yes and no. There are some states that led the way and were regulating PFAS as early as the late 2000s. But they still had to work with the knowledge that was out there at the time, which has continually improved. So sometimes what happens, they put some regulations, say we can't have this much PFAS in drinking water. Now, 15 years ago, we could only, our ability to actually measure PFAS in the lab wasn't actually that good. But it's just leaps and bounds better now. So a lot of times those regulations kind of became outdated over time. That's why I kind of say yes and no. Now that the EPA has that rule on the books to regulate those 6 PFAS on that table, all states have to follow that. Those are kind of the state regulations, or the regulations at the state level have to be at least that strict. Yes, Andrew.
So when was it first determined that there were adverse health effects resulting from PFAS?
The question is, when did we first know about bad health effects from PFAS? I hate to say it's been a while. The very first studies were out of Stanford University. That was the late 1950s. It's been a while. And then by the 70s, the companies that were manufacturing PFOA and PFOS, they did a whole lot. Their workers were getting sick. But, obviously for them, it opened a huge can of worms in terms of liability and the problems that, they perceive stemming from that. So unfortunately, it's been known for a long time by researchers and especially, industry-based researchers, but the public and the government did not know about it until quite a bit later.
Do you have any, just as a follow-up, do you have any idea when, I think that the National Guard has said it was the early 2000s when they used the firefighting foam, that they're now seeing the impacts of at their wells on site. And so I'm just wondering, is there a timeline for New Mexico, like exposure, or when, these things kind of started getting used in New Mexico and, that sort of thing at all?
Yeah. So when did these things first show up in New Mexico? It's a great question. Again, it's kind of hard to answer. After about the 1950s, 1960s, companies started to realize that they were really useful in all kinds of everyday products. Scotchgard, John mentioned your upholstery in your house, in your homes. Gore-Tex and waterproof clothing. I've had so much of that over the years. I like getting outside. I don't like getting wet so much, so I've had all kinds of wet rain gear that has that kind of stuff in it. I would say in general, maybe this is not so New Mexico specific, that by the 70s, quite a few household products had PFAS in them. That's also about the time that the Department of Defense started incorporating them into firefighting materials. Maybe a bit earlier, maybe the mid to late 1960s.
So when they had this, I'll say spill or control spill in the National Guard, what year was that, and did they have that, did they have a meeting of the minds to find out the spill went into the wells, did it contaminate anybody? Did they have any kind of a critique?
Yeah, so when did the spill occur locally in this area? I don't have an answer for that, and I'm not sure maybe if some of our other water-based programs have kind of delved into that.
I can answer that partially.
Sure, yeah.
So it was the early 2000s that there was firefighting, a truck that contained firefighting foams that was parked at the National Guard's helicopter pad. And so what they would do is they would go and they would wash out the truck there. So there wasn't necessarily like a spill per se or something like that. What it was is just this continued washing out of the truck that contained the firefighting foam in that location. And it wasn't discovered until recently because the Department of Defense decided to do a national study of all their facilities where firefighting foams had ever been used because of the massive amounts of litigation that have occurred surrounding firefighting foams. So they had used it at some of the New Mexico bases, including Kirtland Air Force Base and Cannon Air Force Base, which they have much worse problems than we do, and Holloman. So they used them at all those facilities. Here was relatively small comparing to those situations. I'll just say that, but because it had been used here, that's why they did a study. And when they did that study, it was a preliminary assessment, and that preliminary report came out last year. And that is what we got a hold of. We sent that to the county, who was already aware of it. And that's when they tested a few local wells to see if there was contamination, and found contamination. And I believe, is Camila still? She's talking about it. She could tell you exactly how many I've forgotten. Do you recall? Or how many were positive for? 4. Okay. So they tested 6 and 4 were positive. So that is what started this whole process, and they put out the press release, and that started this whole process of all of us getting together. So in this relatively short amount of time since we knew about it, a lot has happened, and we've been doing a lot. So I just want to put that forward too. But the contamination has potentially been there since the 2000s.
Yes, Andrea, that was a super helpful answer. And just really quick, I want to point out to kind of draw a contrast between what Andrea described up here at the aviation support facility, washing out those tanks and containers of PFAS containing foam. And what they would do, because they were required to do it at bigger facilities like the Air Force bases, is like this picture here. They were having to do regular training exercises for putting out petroleum-based fires. And for a long time, again, they didn't really know that much about the health effects, so they were just letting it run off, onto the surface, and generally end up in drainage ways and even ponds and lakes and stuff like that. So I just wanted to mention that because the scale is quite a bit different. It doesn't mean it's any less serious here. The fact it's there, like John said, it's just enough. That's all we need to be concerned. But I just wanted to draw that it is a little bit different situation based on what we know so far compared to out in Clovis or down in Albuquerque or Alamogordo. Yeah, I should say it actually isn't. They've measured relatively small levels of PFAS at Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque. I don't know that much about their testing program. It's been a lot more robust at Cannon and Holloman Air Force Bases. And I saw a number of hands go up, so let me try to.
I just want to interrupt really quick and say it's like 10 after 7, and I know you have a bunch of information to share maybe, but we're trying to close up at 7:30. So I just want to put that out there that I don't know if you want to highlight things you're going to touch on, and maybe people can hold their questions and see if they're going to address it anyway, or if you want to just keep going the way you're going and nobody really cares if they get out of here at 7:30 or not. That's fine with me. I just wanted to bring attention to the time. That's all.
I'm happy to stick around. I'm definitely not going to make my boss stick around. I think that would be a poor form.
I have the key, and I can stay as long as people want their questions answered, and I will stay as long as everyone wants to be here. It's fine to be here.
Let's try what Shelley mentioned, and let me just kind of give an overview of what else I wanted to talk about. I had a couple more things to say about health effects. I wanted to talk about what we know about PFAS in New Mexico and other parts of the state. I wanted to talk a little bit about treatment options, and then I wanted to talk, and this is because I'm a geologist by training, I wanted to talk a little bit about this area's hydrogeology, because I think it's going to really be important in the end story that comes out of La Cienega and La Cienega. So if we can just kind of march on through, I appreciate y'all bearing with me, and I definitely will make time to answer your questions after we get through all this. So this slide, there's just a few things to highlight here. One is that studies show that basically everyone has PFAS in their blood. At this point, probably not a surprise because we know how they're everywhere. This is just a graph that shows going back to about the year 2000. This is from a national health survey. And they're actually able to go back and measure PFAS in people's blood, and then these days they incorporate it more regularly into these surveys. And what it shows pretty much overall is that overall PFAS has been going down in people's blood, and that's because they phased out things like PFOA and PFOS when those companies again were switching to other types of PFAS. So that's a little bit of good news. Now, what I want to say is that if you live somewhere like this area where there's no contamination out there, you know, that doesn't mean that you're going to have health effects from it. Unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily mean you won't, but I want to point out that the story ends up being pretty complicated. And the reason is just these bullets listed down here. The health outcome, well, first of all, not everyone that's been exposed to PFAS will necessarily experience a bad health outcome. That's the first thing to say. But if they do, it depends on a lot of different things, and it depends, you know, what types of health outcomes might occur. One is just what the concentrations of PFAS at that contaminated area are. Are they super high? Are they pretty low? That's going to have a huge effect. The other thing, or a couple related things, are, you know, how frequently was someone exposed? Were they drinking water with PFAS in it every day for a long time? So frequency and duration. Now, I know a lot of folks in these communities have lived in these homes for a long time. I've talked to a number of folks on the phone that described how they've been in their house and drinking water from their wells for 30, 40, probably even 50 years or more even. So with that, I still want to emphasize that even that is not alone is not a predictor of whether or not a person will have some kind of PFAS-related bad health effect. Because other things that have to do with it are, you know, when was someone exposed? Were they exposed as a baby? Were they exposed in the womb? That's a big one. The life stages have a lot to do with it. And then there's all kinds of other susceptibility factors. Those can be things like your genetics, your dietary habits, other environmental factors where you live. So I just want to paint that picture that, you know, it's not a one-to-one correlation that, oh, I drink some water with PFAS in it, I'm going to get sick now. But I also don't want to downplay the fact that sometimes when there are patterns of certain types of illnesses in communities, you know, it's not uncommon to tie it back to a contamination issue. But, you know, I don't want folks to go home and be thinking, I drink a cup of water once with PFAS in it, or even that I drink a cup of water with PFAS in it a day for a long time. It's just, it's hard to say. There's no real predictor or crystal ball out there that will tell you the answer to that question, unfortunately.
And the diagnosis conditions are everywhere and have been for forever. I mean, it's not just because of this.
Right.
So those diagnosis conditions have been ongoing forever, so you can't pin it on that.
Right, unfortunately, and it's like if we had all the information in the world, you know, someone a lot smarter than I could probably put that together and come up with those patterns and trends. But
I feel like the downwinders from Los Alamos with the
right.
That type of thing.
Right, that's a good comparison for sure. So I wanted to talk, and I think this is also probably info that you've all heard a little bit about. We have a couple of fact sheets on the back table that discuss this, English and Spanish versions. But when it comes to treating your water, your drinking water for PFAS, and again, I think Andrea or Shelley mentioned this, but it does not absorb well through the skin. So unlike certain types of contaminants that you worry about, you know, washing your cookware with it, or taking, you know, bathing in that, what we know so far suggests that's not as big an issue with PFAS. So, you know, the water you shower with, doesn't appear to be as big an issue as the water that you're drinking or perhaps cooking your food with. But the two treatment types are carbon filters, specifically what we call activated carbon, and that's a whole technical thing that's not that important for our purposes, and reverse osmosis. And these come in a few different flavors. They come with, and we heard a little bit about this earlier, your whole house, also known as your point of entry filters. That's what's shown here on the left for this carbon filter, or a point of use, and that's what we might just think of as under your kitchen sink filter, something like this. I've got one under my sink, an RO unit that looks almost just like that at home. But they have a few key differences. One is just the way they work. The carbon filters, they're called an adsorption technology. You can think of it like adhering, like tape. That stuff is kind of sticky for PFAS. PFAS sticks to the material in it. Now again, as we heard earlier, that material, that's not an indefinite process. That material will fill up, it'll be stuck all over with PFAS, and then you have to change it out. Whereas reverse osmosis is basically a filtration type of system, what we think of maybe more traditionally like particulate filters. It's just really, really tiny filters that the PFAS is getting stuck on and can't get through into the treated water. Now, RO tends to be more expensive, carbon more affordable. That may be relative though. I mean, my RO unit that looks kind of like that in my home was about $250 or $300. I put it in myself, so I'd save a little bit on labor, but still, I mean, sometimes it's hard to come up with that when you just want some nice clean water out of your kitchen tap to cook with. Now, of course, a whole point of entry, whole home system is going to be quite a bit more than that, regardless of the technology that you might choose. I think this is probably one of the most, well, there's two really important things to say about it. The first is that carbon is generally not quite as effective for certain types of PFAS. And the second thing I'll say about that is that the PFAS that it's been shown to not be as effective for, so far are not the regulated types of PFAS. We don't have to get too much into the technical details of that, but PFOA, it does work pretty well for. PFOS works pretty well for most of the 6 PFAS we saw on that list earlier. RO, greater range of PFAS generally, because that's that filtration technology. It's not quite as selective, maybe is the word. So it's filtering out anything that's coming up to that mesh.
What I understand, you need, like, I don't know, 10 gallons of water to get 1 gallon of water. So I was thinking, oh my God, we are in a short process the water. We don't want waste a lot of water. And here we are to do the opposite. Because it will take a lot of water to filter to get the water what we need. So how we can get, a better solution?
How would you kind of even that out?
Yeah, the city will give us water.
I mean,
Because if you think we are going to run out of water and the Cienega and the Cienega very soon if everybody has a filter like this.
It regenerates itself.
Yeah, because it's like, come on, how you get 1 gallon of water, you need to use it. How many gallons of water you have to use it to get 1 filter water?
right, it's something like that, and
It's
sometimes it
what I understand, I'm
right.
not spelled, but what I understand.
Well, and part of that is that's more kind of on the RO side of things, where you end up with extra water that is then contaminated with that PFAS that got filtered out, and then that's going into this guy right here. So it's a great point. I mean, in New Mexico, we care a lot about water quantity too, right?
Yeah.
And other people have been talking about that in this specific area for a long time. I don't have a great answer for you on that. I hate to say. I mean, it's kind of, these are just what we know work best. There are other technologies that are out there in development, but they're just nowhere near as far along as these ones. They're not even really things you can go, call up, Cyclopure, one of the filtration companies, and ask for a product, because they just don't really exist yet. It's on people's radar. They're just not quite out there so much.
And hi, Monica. I'm Phyllis Bach. I'm sorry I came late. I had another meeting to go to, so I just caught the tail end of that particular one with the water question. Some of the RO systems send it back into the system, and you say, oh, that's just making it more concentrated. But let me tell you how much. Like if I had somebody was contaminated, say with the number 8, with the ones with the O, that's the ones that are the real naughty ones right now. So if you have a gallon of water that's clean, and if you have a gallon of water with the 8, and you mix those 2 gallons together, they meet standards all of a sudden. What we're putting back into this huge aquifer, and I don't know enough information about the size of this aquifer, what we're sticking back in it isn't making it horribly, more concentrated. You're getting what you need and what you're concerned about and getting clean water, but with the systems that send out back the water that they made slightly more concentrated back into the aquifer. I mean, we've already got an aquifer and a plume wherever it's at, but like those are the numbers. Like some of the numbers I've heard are the worst I think I've heard is about 20. So if we mix that with, here's 1 gallon, here's 2 more gallons, all of a sudden it's trying to drink that water straight out of your teeth if you make. So concentrations are kind of hard to, figure out and be concerned. The biggest concern is like get what you are wanting to drink, clean water or what you are feeling comfortable right now, and then they're figuring this all out.
Yeah, that's sorry, go ahead. Yeah, what Phyllis was getting at is something you probably heard before. Dilution is the solution to pollution. If you take some really concentrated water, put it in like a swimming pool, then that's going to help. The problem with PFAS is that they're toxic at such low concentrations. You really want to keep an eye on that. And that's something that is going to be happening with the monitoring wells at the wastewater treatment plant, and hopefully additional work along those lines. But here's a great point, Phyllis. I see a few more hands. Let me try to move through these next few slides really quick. These are more just kind of for your information.
I have to just make a statement.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm Commissioner Bustamante. I want to make sure that you know that she's qualified to say this. I don't want everyone to start coming up with what they heard on the internet. She's a chemical engineer and has been doing a lot of work on this issue since it came up. Just for clarification, eventually everyone gets, well, I heard, and it's like, let's just slow down. So thank you, and I'm sorry for
No worries. Thank you, Commissioner. I've spoken with Phyllis a few times now, and it's always kind of neat to have someone that's, they can see things from a perspective that I don't have. Like I said, I'm a geologist. My head's full of rocks for what it's worth. So just real quick, what we're seeing in public utilities versus private wells across the state of New Mexico. We have measured to date about 75 different public water systems in the state, and the vast majority of them are doing pretty well. And this includes both the treated drinking water that comes out of people's kitchen sinks, kitchen taps, and what we call the source water, what my team, Environment Department, primarily deals with, and that's the untreated water straight from a well, straight from a stream or a lake or a reservoir. And all I want to show on these diagrams, these pie charts, is that these colors represent different types of PFAS. Yellow is that PFOS. This one's hard to see. There's a dark gray that's PFOA. We're not seeing those a whole lot of places, and even when we do, a lot of times, in fact, the vast majority of time, they're under the new regulation standards. You can see a couple hot spots, though. There's some reds and oranges. Those are higher levels. This is out by Clovis, and in fact, it's right next to and on Cannon Air Force Base. Cannon operates its own public water utility, and not surprisingly, we're seeing it there. Also, some hits down in the Alamogordo, Otero County area. One thing you'll notice in Santa Fe County is we don't have that much data yet, and there's an ongoing sampling effort that EPA requires of public water systems to complete over the next 2 years. By 2026, that's called the Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule. It's a bit of a misnomer now. But with the completion of that rule and that sampling, we'll see a lot more data points in Santa Fe County. So we're getting to where we can get, but we got a small team, and we often have to go to outside help like the U.S. Geological Survey. And in terms of public water systems, John mentioned earlier that the La Cienega Mutual Domestic Association has had so far non-detections in their water. USGS just took more measurements at their active water well as well as an inactive well last month on May 8th, and I just got the very preliminary results back, still non-detection. So again, a little bit of good news there.
Where are those wells?
It's just, it's the, you know, the mutual domestic system. If you have a line that's hooked up to the mutual domestic system, they use a well. That's where the water comes from
I'm
for
just
that
asking
system.
where the well is.
Oh, the well.
It is about a
Yeah.
mile south of the southernmost Santa Fe Airport runway. So it is up on the mesa, it's up high. The other well, I believe, is in the valley, but I'd have to check that. I think it's near the Acequia on the north side of the valley, but I'm not positive. And I might have my geography all messed up here, so I apologize. But both of those so far non-detect. They need to undergo a data quality review. That's kind of another technical thing. But we've worked with this particular lab for a long time and really never had any issues. So I'd be surprised if those results change for some reason. So just wanted to make sure you all are aware of that. Not published anywhere yet, but as soon as they're reviewed, they'll be available to see on NMED's website. Now let's switch to private wells really quick around the state. And I'm just showing this by counties because, as you can probably imagine, we don't really like to zoom in on folks' homes and addresses and say, hey, here's where a big hit of PFAS was, because then they're worried about things like their property values and it also just treating their water and what people might perceive of that area. So we tend to show this kind of data from a county standpoint, and the green is, and this is looking at all PFAS, not just one or two PFAS. This is all of a set of 28 different PFAS, including the 6 we've been talking about that are now regulated at utilities. Again, out of almost 300 samples, 253 of them, we didn't find anything at all. Now, some we found multiple PFAS in, or maybe just one or two, but at very low levels. And still others, we found a few PFAS, but maybe at higher levels. One of the places where that latter case is most true, again, is in Curry County, where Cannon Air Force Base is located, west of the city of Clovis. So, no surprise, there are things happening out there to kind of turn the wheels a little bit faster for those folks that are affected. What's not included here are some of the dairy farms out there they're literally almost on the base. They're on the border of the base, and they have some extremely high levels, but those aren't included in this. These are mainly just wells used for drinking water purposes. Santa Fe County, in parentheses here, I know it's hard to see, but we have 7 private well samples, not including the handful that have been shared with me from this area, both La Cienega and La Cienega, over the last 6 or 7 months. So that 7 doesn't include those wells. The sort of maximum value, which is what these colors represent, is only about, I think it's about 9 parts per trillion. And that was from a well that, I won't say where it is, but it's not in this area for what it's worth. So, obviously we're going to fill in a lot of data gaps here, or at least that's the hope. But we can talk a little bit about that later.
Can you say what the highest level of the test from this area was then?
The ones that I've seen, and I believe it's one of the 6 that was first reported by the county. I can't remember what the total overall level was, but I do remember it had about 25 parts per trillion of both PFOA and PFOS, which is it's over 6 times the drinking water standard. So they're pretty high.
Is there anything over 4 parts per trillion that's above?
For those 2 PFAS, that's correct. Yeah, the new utility regulations for those 2 are that 4 parts per trillion. So appreciate you pointing that out.
Sorry, this is Phyllis.
Yes, Phyllis.
Just to kind of get a feeling of this number, we're seeing the number 4, we're seeing the number 20, 24, 30 even, that I've seen, 20 to 30 in our area. But Cannon Air Force Base, 24,000 is the number they're looking at. Our number used to fit within the range. The old number that EPA, that was never regulated, but the old number was 70. And we fit into that number. Now they're learning more about it. Now they want that number to be 4. And so just to kind of get a ballpark figure of all the numbers around, like, you know, oh my God, I'm drinking 3 times as much as the regulated limit. We don't want to be drinking this, but that regulated limit is still very, very small, and we're just on the cusp of being over it. And the Department of Health, they'll just say, no PFAS are good in your body, that's the bad ones. Again, I just called them the naughty ones. So it's just to kind of keep your level of concern. You eat tuna, you know, how many of you still eat tuna with the mercury in it? Things like that. Everybody's perspective and level is different, and that's good. We're going to try to help all of you. Some of you are going to want 0. All of us are going to eventually want 0, but it's taking time and it's coming. Because we're kind of lucky that Curry did it first, 4 years ago, I think. And so they started the process. It's been started, and I'm not going to repeat because I'm sure this was already said earlier. But just to kind of give you a level and perspective of where are you, what's your concern, and how can we help you till we get it fixed, completely fixed. And so we've got a few years, but what can we do to make you comfortable with what you're drinking and where you're at? Some people are like, you know, I get it in my plastic bottles. That's not, they want to feel. Those aren't in your plastic bottles. But anyway, you know, stuff like that, just to kind of give you a feel for it. And sorry if I
No, that's great, Phyllis. I mean, it speaks back to something that we were talking about earlier, that the knowledge is always evolving on these things. And then I like what you said about, you know, what folks are comfortable with and comparing it to, you know, something like eating tuna or stuff that we know that fish get poisoned by certain types of contaminants. And I mean, there is a certain level of comfort level involved for folks on this.
And Phyllis has a table at the back on filtration as well, if anybody wants more information about that. But I asked that you kind of maybe meet with her very quietly and whisper if you're going to meet with her in the back of the room.
Well, I told you all my head's full of rocks because I'm a geologist, and that's what these slides are showing. I'm going to skip through a few that aren't so important. But what I want to focus on is this, and let me take a second to orient you on this map. Here's the Santa Fe River. Here's the wastewater treatment plant. Here's La Cienega. Las Golondrinas is right here. And then we are right about down here. So we're kind of on the westernmost part of this map. Now, what is this map showing? It's showing essentially the thickness of the geologic unit in which your local aquifer exists. And that's called the Ancha Formation. There's another important unit below it called the Tesuque Formation that you may have heard about. But for our purposes here, we mainly want to talk about the Ancha Formation. And these maps are always a little hard to visualize. You know, I spent a long time as a field geologist looking at outcrops, and I've worked a little bit in the Santa Fe area. I would walk the Santa Fe River, the dry bed in town, and actually look at some of those outcrops there. And what I was trying to do when I was doing that was trying to imagine that what would happen if I took what I'm looking at right in front of me and push it in the subsurface where I can't see it, unless I have a well or something. So what this is showing is what the Ancha Formation aquifer looks like underground. And they get that data by looking at water levels in wells, looking at water quality data in wells, and then using that kind of surface information like I just described to kind of pull that picture together. I know it sounds a little, maybe a little abstract or kind of hard to conceive, and it is. I mean, it's a hard science, but it draws together different data sources to better understand something like how thick is an aquifer and where is it exactly. We tend to think of aquifers as kind of like lakes or underground rivers, and in some ways they kind of are, but in a lot of ways they aren't. One of the most important things that these researchers from the New Mexico Bureau of Geology and Socorro found when they did a big study in La Cienega about the wetlands, I think back in 2015, the reference is up there, is when they published this. What they found is that the Ancha Formation, if you could cut a slice of the earth away like a birthday cake and look at it from the side on, what they found is that it looks like this. And this is where it has little dips in it that come back up. And these are old river channels. They're underground now. We can't really see them, except maybe in a few places that we see it in a road cut or walking down the Santa Fe River in town or something like that. And even then, they can be hard to see. But why it's important is that the aquifer does kind of go across the whole Antra Formation, but in those areas, in those old, what we call paleo valleys, it's thicker in those areas. And that's what these dark purple colors show. So just east of where we are, it's pretty thick between here and I-25, which is hard to see, but it goes kind of like that across this map. Not nearly as thick under what they call the Tsuke surface south of the airport. So that's just one of the stories I want to point out here. And the other one, because it's going to be important as they do these studies to figure out where the contamination's at, is those paleo valleys, they had enough data from wells to kind of at least guess where they are in the subsurface. And that's what these blue lines show. They're not actual rivers on the surface. They're not the modern day drainages like Cienega Creek or Arroyo Hondo or any of those. They're old drainages underground that we can't see just looking at a map of the surface. One of them goes just to the south of La Cienega, and then a couple feed right into this area where that really thick purple is, where that thick Antra Formation aquifer. So when we're talking about the wastewater treatment plant and airport area, that might play a role. My best guess is that it probably will play a significant role in understanding where contamination either is or where it could get or where it's even been. I'm not going to say that for 100% certainty now, because like Don mentioned, we're just kind of at the outset of learning a lot of this information. But I wanted to make folks aware of it because this is a really important study, and obviously this was before anyone knew about the PFAS out here. We're just kind of fortunate that these folks came out and did this study, which was more about trying to predict how long the wetlands would last and come up with solutions to preserve them and preserve the natural hydrology as best as possible. And this is the last one I have to show. This cartoon kind of shows that. This is the water table in the Antra Formation. This is like, again, if you're looking at a cross section or a cross cut of the earth, and it's showing how it intersects the wetlands down here and feeds the wetlands down here in La Cienega. And then, it's a bit more complicated in other, modern drainages. But this kind of hydrology tends to be pretty important for understanding where contaminations come from and where it's going. And I just want to put it out there because I guarantee this study is going to be referenced when they're putting together that data and that information here in the next few years. All right, I'm sorry I talked your ear off. Like I said, my head's full of rocks and I get pretty nerdy about geology. I appreciate you bearing with me, and I know there's going to be lots of hands, so we go with you, sir.
I'm going to get back to my question about the filters then. Where they all go and what's going to happen? Are we going to create a bigger problem or are we solving a smaller problem?
Well, appreciate that. We actually knew that question was coming, so I had some conversation with our hazardous waste bureau about what can be done with these filters. And let me start off by saying, even as we speak, EPA is requesting comments about how to dispose of or store PFAS. So they don't have all the answers. But the filters we're talking about, the filter media associated with these smaller filtration systems, are legal to dispose of in a municipal landfill. And so, yeah, the issue is, let me qualify that, okay? Remember what Andy said about the fact that the granulated activated charcoal is a really good source for snagging this stuff and hanging on to it. It doesn't turn loose of it once it's got it. That's why the filter plugs up. As long as you're dealing with a landfill that is not wet, then there's not a mechanism to move that PFAS off of that charcoal and into the ground. And our landfills, the ones that are regulated by the state, are required to monitor for seepage coming out of the landfills and do periodic testing and stuff. So these small filters that, when you replace the filter, the charcoal stays in the filter. It's not like you're dumping it out, right? You get rid of the whole filter. I just replaced the filter in my refrigerator last week. Same thing, pop it out, get rid of it. So what's inside the filter stays there. And as long as it's not exposed to wet conditions, it's not gonna migrate. Similarly, the other filtration media for your reverse osmosis and stuff are gonna do the same thing. Now, as Andy said earlier, the more we know, the more things change. Okay? Currently, the PFAS constituents, those 6, are identified by EPA as hazardous constituents. Okay? They've not taken the step to say they're hazardous materials, which at whatever point they go there, we're talking about sending them to a hazardous waste landfill. Okay? Currently, that's not the requirement. And the reality is, when you talk about the amount of PFAS that you're pulling out with one of these filters and disposing of it, it's very minimal. So it's safe to dispose of them in the normal landfills and the normal trash. Now, I grew up on a farm, and the landfill back then was this big garbage down at the end of the dirt road, and you just took it back up and dumped your stuff in it. That's not what I'm talking about. But a regulated landfill is a safe place to dispose of this stuff, so that's a good thing. One other thing I wanted to share with you just real fast is there was some discussion, y'all have heard about an $18 million grant for emerging contaminants that NMED got. And I want to qualify what that is for. It's to be used to sample for PFAS, but it's for public water systems, mutual, domestic, city. Currently, the law won't let us do anything with private wells. Now, several of our federal legislators, Senator Heinrich, some of his constituents, are working on legislation. His is called Clean H2O, and the purpose of it is to free up this federal funding so that we can use it for private wells. Now, for the municipal domestics, and so La Cienega can qualify for this, and we're actually doing it different than we've ever done it. They don't apply for the money. We're going to go to those systems. We're going to do the sampling for them. For the emerging contaminants.
People might not like that, I'll just tell you from the perspective of the mutual domestic.
Well,
Yeah.
but here's the issue. They don't have an option.
Okay. Well,
They are required to sample. Every public water system over the next 2 years has got to sample for these emerging contaminants, specifically PFAS. And then after that 2 years, they have 4 years to build and put in place whatever treatment system they may need if the contamination isn't identified. So the first phase of this project that we've got, the first phase of this grant, is to go out and assist those communities in getting that sampling done to decide if they have a problem or not. Years 3, 4, and 5 of the grant, which is more money coming in, totals about somewhere in the neighborhood of $60 million total that we will apply for. Years 3, 4, and 5 will be in the communities where we identify the contamination, coming to them, connecting them with the engineering firms to do the designs, and then helping them fund the installation of the treatment system. All right? So this is one of those weird places where we found ourselves in a position where we could actually get on the front end of helping the communities be compliant with all of this stuff. Usually it's the other way around. They get hit with a requirement and then we're playing catch up. We were in the lead on this one. I will tell you I'm kind of proud of my team because New Mexico is the only state in Region 6 of EPA that applied for this funding first year. Okay. We did it because we recognize the problems we have in this state. And I do a lot of talking about the lack of water that we have, the fact that we're running out of water, and we need to protect every drop. So we're trying to be in the front of this. And as much as I wish I could say we're here with money to sample these private wells, I can't do that today. But what I will tell you is that we're working on that. And I would encourage you to reach out to your legislators and support them in that. The understanding that it needs to happen is there. It's just get everybody to move.
I have 2 questions.
Okay.
Okay, so the first one is, I know the New Mexico Environment Department does water fairs where they do private well testing for certain things. would there be a possibility of doing some water fairs that could incorporate PFAS testing? So that's one question I have. Second question, okay, so I just want to put them both out there, is can you tell us more about the fines that were issued to the city of Santa Fe? And were those by your department or by the, I think they were, right? Correct? Okay. And could we talk about where that money goes and whether or not any of those funds could be reallocated to help with issues created by the failure of the city of Santa Fe to monitor their E. coli population?
See how well she did that? She took that 2 questions and turned it into about 6. That's because she knows I start charging a quarter a pop. I'm just saying. So with regard to the first question, when we do water fairs in communities, we're looking at contaminants that we see when there's cross connections between wells and septic systems. We look at nitrates, we look at iron, we look at fluoride, sometimes we look at sulfates. If we have DOH there with us, we look at arsenic. Now we are gearing up to start doing the arsenic testing ourselves at these water fairs, and we're actually starting in July. We're purchasing equipment going to all the local field offices around the state so that they can do the test. You can walk in with a water sample and they can test it there. Now, I'm going to tell you that this is what I call dirty sampling, because we're doing it with a hot test kit, right? You take your sample, you didn't collect it using specific laboratory methods, you bring it into us, we run it with this meter, and you can show a hit. And if it does, what that tells us is that we need to let you know you need to take another sample, you need to contact a certified lab, because we got an indication, but it's not specific, okay? It's a dirty test. It's not lab grade, but it helps you understand what you need to do, right? So we're looking at expanding to arsenic. PFAS is a little more difficult because I'm not aware of a rapid test yet for PFAS, but if they develop that, if we can do it, we would certainly add something like that to a repertoire. Second, the 6 questions regarding our dealings with the Santa Fe wastewater treatment plant. Yes, we did issue an administrative compliance order with civil penalties of about $2.4 million. We issued it because for a significant period of time, they had not been compliant with their U.S. EPA federal discharge permit to the river, okay? They've been discharging water that was high in E. coli levels and some other things. We don't control that permit, it's EPA. EPA has come in a few times and slapped them on the hand, but nothing has happened. And we finally let EPA know we're fixing to swing a bigger stick here. Even though we don't permit them under our state water quality regulations, we can go after anybody that is doing something detrimental to groundwater or surface water. So that's what we did. And we are going to court, right? Because they're challenging whether we've got the authority to do that. We absolutely believe we do. We'll see how it plays out. But we doggone sure got some people's attention by doing this. And that's what ultimately we want. Now, the next part of that question, was what happens with the money? Well, in a perfect world, that money would come into my budget so that I can afford to do more for the state. The reality is those funds go back to the state general fund, and the legislature allocates that money. Okay, so it doesn't come directly to us. But here's the caveat. We can, with these administrative compliance orders, negotiate the settlement terms. I'm not in favor of negotiating the dollar amount down, but I am potentially willing to say, okay, you take that $2.3 million and you invest it here in your system right now. Make a change that's going to fix this problem, and we'll let you invest it there instead of paying it to the general fund. To me, that's smart business, right? We'll see. Like I say, I may get spanked and say, oh, I don't think so. but we'll see.
I'd just like to offer that we get political on this, okay? The county has been asking the city to collaborate because they don't have the funds or they've had a hard time balancing their books. The county is doing well. So we have the state looking, we have the county interested, and it just takes a little bit of egos pushed aside so that we can do something right for the people. I hope, and I feel compelled to say this to you, let's go to our neighborhood legislators and talk to them that we've been asking the city of Santa Fe to work with us to fix this problem. You say they have been with the E. coli, and they are today. I'm gonna promise you that their levels right now might just be somewhere near not supposed to be where they are. So, thank you. I wanted to throw that out before I leave.
I appreciate that too, and I will tell you, yes.
I just also wanted to make a comment, because I read an article in the newspaper, and I was actually very concerned about the article, and for the reason that the article made it seem like the E. coli issue has only been happening for like the last year. And John Dupree, as you know, is the mover and the shaker who has done everything for this community in terms of what's going on at the city of Santa Fe actually fixing these problems, and he has been there the last year. And it's making it look like maybe he's tied to that issue. And that is a big problem for me because when you have someone who's a mover and a shaker, you don't want people in the city of Santa Fe administration pointing the finger and saying, oh, it's because he's been here. We're just going to get rid of this one guy who's this troublemaker and helping the county out.
Yeah.
And so that's really my concern, is actually putting on the record how long the E. coli issue has been an issue, which has been decades from my understanding.
That's true, and that's the reason we decided to pull the trigger. And I'm gonna tell you that Region 6 wasn't particularly happy when we let them know that we're fixing to do your job for you. Then they've started to step up, and we're having a lot of conversation with them, maybe we do something as well. But the issue becomes, and I have problems all over this state with water systems and wastewater treatment systems. And you know what the issue is? At the end of the day, it's how it's managed. Right? It's how they invest the money that they get, because there's a lot of money that's available and flows to fix these systems. But it's how communities, how cities, how counties, whoever it is, spend that money. I'm dealing with a system down south that we had to do the same thing with. And you know what we're finding is they were supposed to do a rate increase 4 years ago. They never did. And they haven't maintained their system, and suddenly they got arsenic problems, right? They got a major issue on their hands, and it comes back to the fact that they didn't manage it right. They didn't make the rate increases, and nobody wants those. But it costs money to run these systems. You got to maintain them. If you don't, then you get into these kinds of situations. Yes, sir.
Doesn't these companies, the city of Santa Fe, sewer plant have to run by conduct of operations, following procedures where they have to follow guidelines from the state and be penalized? I worked in a place in Los Alamos, we were with the water, and we have a penalty of any sort. They fine the heck out of us, and we had so much time to fix it. We had a conduct of operations, everybody has to sign that, everybody has to be briefed on it, and you know, why aren't heads rolling? If people are sneaky things like what just came out in the paper today, that's a shame on them.
Well, it's a good point. And the reality is that they're supposed to have standard operating procedures, and they're supposed to have trained operators, and they're supposed to meet all these requirements.
That's what we have to our mills.
Right?
Help us, right?
But, so here's the issue. We are limited in the staff that we have to stay on top of all the systems that we've got. And this hammering these communities with these administrative compliance orders, this is something new. That's something we just started this year. All right? Because if you know, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and thinking you're going to get a different result. So we're changing how we work with these systems. We're changing who's accountable. And, you know, the comment from the commissioner about accountability in the city and the county, well, this is exactly what we're looking at. You know, I'm going to, in these other communities, I'm going to the cities and I'm going to the counties that are part of this water association. They put it together and say, you know what? Ultimately, you're responsible for taking care of your citizens. So don't tell me that if that system doesn't have enough money to operate, that, oh well. No, it's your board. You better figure out where to find the money to cover the gap, and while they fix their rates or whatever. It's just time for us to be quite honest, to grow up in New Mexico, all right? And accept that we've all got a responsibility, you know? It's gonna take time. I'm not real popular in several circles right now over this. And
Hope you don't retire anytime soon. Let's start all over again.
Man, I wish you hadn't brought that up. So I've got this retirement counter my wife put on my phone. And it says I got about 2 years and 6 months. It happens to coincide with when this current administration leaves. What I've tasked my teams with is this. We got 2 years and 6 months to put stuff in place and make it bulletproof so that it goes on no matter who's in the administration. You know what it takes to do that? You guys working with us, right? This is where it's not the politicians, because those politicians, even though they don't get paid, they work for you. They work for me. I work for you. But if we can educate the communities, and that's why I'm glad we're here, if we can educate the communities, if we can get you guys involved in the importance of why we need to do things different with these systems and why we need to do a different job, that's what's going to carry it across whatever administration comes in, right? Is the customers, the people that own this state, and that's the folks sitting in this room. All right? So, a lot about education going on. I wish I had all the answers everybody wants to hear. I don't, but I'm committed, and my team is committed to doing everything we can for the people that live in this community and all throughout this state. May not get it right every day, but we're not going to quit. We're here for the long run, so know that. All right? Yes.
You mentioned earlier about waterfare. Is there any one planned in the near future?
So that's why I mentioned that I'm working to equip local field offices, and you may know them as the Environmental Health Bureaus, where you would go to get food permits and they deal with the septic systems and stuff. Well, we're equipping them with the testing equipment and training them to do that for us. We have a very limited budget to do the water fares. It's federal money. So this is something I'm doing outside of that. I'm pulling money from other places to ramp this up. We're going to be looking at doing other additional water fares. It's just funding it differently, but I really want to equip these local field offices, right? And there's 23 of them around the state to be able to do this. And there's an ulterior motive, right? Andy talked about bringing data. That sampling data from those private wells helps us fill in the blanks. Even if we're not getting PFAS, if we're figuring out nitrates, if we're seeing this other stuff, if it's helping us understand, because we want to know how deep is your well, how's it built, that kind of stuff, that helps us map what's going on. So, that was the deal. I'll buy the equipment. It's going to cost me $5,000 to $10,000 per office to equip them and then keep the chemicals in. The deal was, I want copies of every test you run. I don't need names. Don't want that. Not getting that personal about it, but GPS coordinates the general area, and so that we can build this map. We can increase our community's knowledge. And when I talk to you, I'm talking the whole state of what we're doing with the water. It's just, we got it, right? We want to be here for the long run.
Is that the same as the New Mexico Department of Geology and Mineral Resources mapping program that they're doing?
It is.
Or is it separate?
It's separate, but we're sharing that information with them as well.
Okay, I was just curious about that because we've been working with them.
Yeah, it's separate, but this is something that we're going to share with them. I've got them now doing some extra sampling and stuff for brackish water because we're looking at reuse, and part of it's maybe desalinating brackish water. We need to know exactly how bad.
Oh, that was private water.
Yeah.
Public water. We'll get into that. But I was going to say, I did want to make just one announcement, and I think that you provided a perfect lead-in part. First of all, I just wanted to thank everybody who's taken the time to come here, present to us today. All these folks are here outside of their work hours to meet with our community, and I think it really shows a commitment to us that they're here. So I just, if we could, give a round of applause to the people. And then the only other announcement I have is that the Valley Association is having their annual meeting on July 6th. And there will be nominations for board positions. If anybody wants to serve on the LCVA board, we have currently 2 vacant positions for La Cienega. Unfortunately, our 2 very good people who are serving for us are not able to continue serving, and so we need to fill both of those positions. So if any of you live in La Cienega and you're interested, that's a great way to get involved. Also, if you don't want to be on the board itself, we have the PFAS task force, which Kathleen is doing a wonderful job of running, and so you can play a part in helping other residents to understand these issues better and to help to educate them and do all the things that we've been saying that we'd like to help do. So.
It's also the breakfast.
And there's also breakfast, 9 to 11, 9 to 11, breakfast. That's all you can do.
Get me that, yes.
All right. The closing?
I think we're done unless you folks have any other questions or you have anything else to say. Thank you all for being here. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.